Hello and welcome to our London History Podcast, where we share our love of London, its people, places and history. This podcast is designed for you to learn things about London that most Londoners don't even know, all in 20 minutes. I am your host, Hazel Baker, qualified London tour guide and CEO of LondonGuidedWalks.co.uk. If you enjoy what we do, then rate and review. You can become a patron for as little as £5, and that's where we share additional videos of the interviews with you, plus lots of other unique content. You can help us keep this podcast advert-free. We deliver walking tours of London for those who love London, no matter whether you're a Londoner or a visitor. We will help you make the most of London. Check out our website, LondonGuidedWalks.co.uk, for a full selection of guided walks and private tours. Get that cup of tea, put your feet up, and enjoy. Joining me in the studio today is John Donegan, the Events and Engagement Officer at Handel and Hendrix in London. Hello, John.
Hello. How are you today, Hazel?
Doing all right. I'm looking forward to this one, you know. So we're unlikely neighbours, and we're going to be talking about two unlikely neighbours as well, aren't we?
Yeah, maybe they're slightly more unlikely than us, but yeah.
So tell the audience, who are we going to be talking about today?
So, yeah, we're going to be talking about George Frideric Handel, Baroque composer extraordinaire, and Jimi Hendrix, rock icon, who lived side by side in London, obviously a few hundred years apart, but they were neighbours.
So if we're talking about Brook Street in Mayfair, it's a really nice address, isn't it? It's not somewhere where you would really imagine Jimi Hendrix to be living.
No. I suppose it served a few purposes for him at the time, in that it was a fairly commercial place. You know, there was a lot of shops. It wasn't particularly residential, so he basically could play music as loud as he wanted at night, and he had no neighbours to disrupt. So that was one of the reasons why it was a good location for him. And perhaps it wasn't quite as posh, should we say, as it is now. It was a little more normal back then.
Yeah, and of course we're talking about the swinging 60s here, so Carnaby Street was really hitting its mark, and of course Brook Street isn't too far away from Carnaby Street at all.
Exactly. It was a great location, you know, to nip over to Ronnie Scott's and play an impromptu jam session, or invite people back round to his afterwards as well from places like Ronnie Scott's. So yeah, it was a very good location. It was so central and so easy to get to, all those different places that were so important in that, you know, that idea of the swinging 60s in London. So it worked for him, definitely. And it wasn't, I think he was paying £30 a week for it at the time.
£30 a week? That's not bad, is it?
Yeah. I think in today's money it's about 400, so it's still quite pricey, but yeah.
I mean, if you think of the venues that were around at the time, because you had the Marquee,
exactly,
Speakeasy, you got, and obviously the Scotch of St James's. And is it right that he would actually go to these clubs and see if he could actually play on that night?
Oh, definitely, yeah. He was a performer. If he could, if there was somewhere for him to play, he was going there. And he was going to perform. If you look at the list of gigs, I mean, he was gigging constantly. And they're the gigs that he was, you know, selling tickets for and that are documented. If you add on top of that the fact that he was then going to the Marquee Club or Scotch of St James and then jamming for a couple of hours with people, and then he was going back to his flat and he was playing again, he was jamming there. So yeah, he was just a relentless performer. That's what he lived to do.
Yeah, it sounds a really amazing time. I know I did a music degree, and so all of those post concert parties, that's where the real music happens.
Exactly. Yeah, we have a great video of him playing I Can See for 1,000 Miles on a 12-string acoustic guitar in the flat. It's a really cool acoustic recording. And yeah, you get that sort of those. It would have been great to be there in that sort of atmosphere, because it's quite a small room and it's just filled with people, and he's just playing with, you know, various other people like Richie Havens and people like that were there as well. So yeah, it would have been a really cool after party to go to.
And what brought him to London? What was it that he needed that he thought London could offer him?
I suppose, I mean, literally what brought him to London was Chas Chandler. So formerly of the Animals, Chas brought him over because he had been highlighted to him by Keith Richards' girlfriend at the time. When she saw him playing in a club, she sort of highlighted how amazing he was. And yeah, Chas Chandler brought him over to London. This is where, this is where he made his name in the UK. He was actually then part of the Monterey Pop Festival's UK Invasion Act. That's what he went over back to America as once he'd been here. So Paul McCartney and George Harrison, I think, had seen him play, and then I think that they were heavily involved in the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, and they brought him over there as part of the UK Invasion Act, which I always think is quite a funny, quite an interesting story. But London, yeah, it was just one of the centres of that culture, the rock and roll culture at the time.
To think that he also changed his name to create this new identity as well.
Yeah, I think definitely that was part of it. He was creating this sort of this character. Yeah, London, I think also he talked about there being less hang-ups, I think he says. And I think there he's talking about the fact that his race wasn't... in no way can you say that there wasn't racism in the country at the time. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it was different. The segregation that was a legal thing in America at the time. He had been playing on the Chitlin circuit, which was exclusively, you know, segregated audiences. He'd been playing on the Chitlin circuit, which was just for black musicians. So yeah, it was a very different atmosphere, and he felt that, and he felt there wasn't as much of an emphasis on the fact that he was black. He could be a musician more, and it really provided him with that platform.
I think also going to a place where it really is happening and immersing yourself completely, absolutely, giving yourself over, changing your name, as you said, but also going to as many clubs and experiencing the music that was happening right that moment. You have to go in for it, don't you? Hook, line and sinker, 100%. You've got to throw yourself in there. Yeah,
definitely. And he did, you know, he was... So the first time the Beatles saw him, they had just released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club, and he came out, and it had literally just been released 2 days before, and he came out and did a cover version of it. They were there in the audience that night. So yeah, and that's sort of how they became aware of him. So yeah, he was fully immersed. You know, he was friends with the Beatles and, you know, Chas Chandler and these people. So he stayed at Ringo Starr's flat for a while, and George Harrison used to come over and stay in the room isn't now part of the museum. Unfortunately, that floor was sort of really altered after he'd left. But a room that sort of would have been a floor up of where his bedroom was. George Harrison used to stay there quite often. So yeah, he was fully, like you say, fully immersed in it.
Hendrix became aware that he had a famous neighbour, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, he was. So I suppose also connected to the fact that he really immersed himself in the culture. The first evening he was here, he met Kathy Etchingham. So Kathy Etchingham was a DJ and sort of a name on the London scene at the time. And he met her, and then they sort of started a relationship from then. In 1968, she found the flat in Mayfair for him. So she found it. So he didn't know about the connection beforehand. That isn't why he took the flat. But once he realised that, and once he found himself there in the presence sort of another musical figure such as Handel, he was really keen on the idea. He thought he was actually living in the flat because the blue plaque at the time was sort of misplaced. So he thought he was in the same building as Handel had been. Not the flat, sorry. Yeah, he thought his flat had been part of Handel's house. And but yeah, he went out to HMV around the corner and he bought Messiah. And I think one of the quotes he said, I think someone asked him about Handel and he said, "I don't know much about the cat. I dig a bit of Bach now and again." I don't know if Handel's ever been referred to as a cat before, but yeah, that's what he said. And he really liked Messiah. And, he did play it. So, yeah.
Imagining it on these Bang & Olufsen speakers at full volume, that sounds like quite
Definitely.
a wicked.
And I think when you listen to especially his later Electric Ladyland, there is some real operatic, grandeur to a lot of the songs. So, yeah, they're sort of almost composition, some of them. You can see the influences of all these different genres that he soaked up, because that's what he did. He soaked up so much stuff in a very short amount of time, and he put it into his work. And you can definitely hear that, I think, when you listen to those things.
Yeah, well, that makes a good artist, though, isn't it? It was when you listen, you're able to process that and then create something that's your own from those influences.
Exactly, yeah. Taking things that, might have been done a few hundred years ago, but getting elements of that into something extremely contemporary at the time and revolutionary. So, yeah, it was really, really interesting, his sort of what influenced him.
So Handel and Hendrix were neighbours, albeit 204 years apart. But Hendrix saw Handel, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He claims to have. He was in the bathroom one evening, and he saw him in the mirror. He saw Handel apparently. Whether he was under the influence of some alcohol, perhaps that evening, I'm not.
Something stronger.
Yeah, could have been something else. I'm not entirely sure, but. Yeah, I mean, it shows that he was on his mind as well, I suppose, at least. Like, he was thinking about that connection, wasn't he? Which I think is interesting in of itself.
It might be a good time now to move our attention to Handel, who lived at 23 Brook Street for 36 years.
Yes, he did. Handel was he was the first person to call it home as well. So Handel moves in 1723 as the first resident there. It's one of the first residential buildings in that area of Mayfair. So Mayfair before the 1720s is quite a rural, it's fields and farms that you're going into. You're at the edge of London, if you can imagine that now, when you've got Oxford Street around the corner. Not really, but yeah, you're at the edge of London. So that's the first development, and yeah, he moves in 1723.
Can you imagine the guests that he would have had to his house, or the singers and instrumentalists as well? Definitely,
yeah. It was a real working space. I think that's one of the interesting things about the house, and there's a bit of continuity there with what we do as well, because we still have concerts on, and we're always, music is always being played in there. We have the Handel House talent, young people who are playing early instruments come and practice and put on programs, and it's a very much a working space, and it was for Handel as well. He was constantly writing. He was a workaholic in the extreme. In one of his manuscripts, the date, he dates them, and he's working like every day. And then on Christmas Day, you see that he scratches out the date, and he sort of gives himself a day off. So he was going to sit down to work on Christmas Day, but he does give himself the day off. But yeah, he was such a workaholic. But it was a space where he practiced. People would come over. He'd give performances in the music room that we now have, and he'd sell tickets and things downstairs as well for programs and different shows. So yeah, a really interesting space in that sense.
So it might be worth investigating the cultural landscape. So we touched on the swinging 60s for Hendrix, but what was it like for Handel coming in the 1700s? What would have he experienced London?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time, a time of big changes, definitely. And when Handel comes over in 1710 initially, you've got the question of the succession looming over the country, and it's pretty sure by this stage, that the Hanoverians are going to be coming in. George, who's going to become George first, is Elector of Hanover at this time, and Handel's already worked with him, so he comes over to England on a bit of a sabbatical almost for working with George I. A bit of a cultural scout he is for that incoming royal family. So he comes in 1710, and it's not meant to be a permanent stay, or at least we don't think it was meant to be a sort of permanent thing when he first comes over. But I think London at the time it's such a place of opportunity. It's the place where you go if you want to make money in almost anything. And that's especially true if you want to make money in the arts, then you come to London, because you're not having to rely on the patronage of, one monarch or a court or these sorts of things. You can go and make your fortune yourself. There is this much more open marketplace for these sorts of things. So he comes over and starts to really do well and become part of British culture in a big way. There's a huge appetite for continental art at the time. So for music and art and opera and all these sorts of things, there's a huge appetite. It's sort of the beginnings of the Grand Tour. These middle upper class gentlemen going across the country and seeing all the things that are contained within that Grand Tour and that idea. So when they come back, they have this idea that they're really sort of cultured, and a lot of that's tied up with then Italian opera. And Handel's obviously really able to capitalize on that because that's his background. He's able to really draw on his previous experiences working in Italy, and he makes a lot of connections, a lot of money, and becomes a real part of British culture at the time. So then by the time George I comes over in 1714, Handel's pretty much established himself, and also it's, like I was saying, that sort of cultural scout for the Hanoverians. They have some people are aware of them more so probably because of Handel. They're more aware of the culture that they can bring and these sorts of things. So it's a really interesting environment that he finds himself in. I think there is some anti-German sentiment at the time as well, which he has to deal with. So there's some similarities there, I think, with Hendrix as well. That idea of being an outsider and different, and there being some discrimination because of that. So, a really unique sort of time to come to London, I think.
I like the idea that he liked us so much that he actually wanted to be a British citizen.
Yeah, he was. So I think 1727, he's naturalised. Weirdly, he still never buys his house, so you couldn't own property if you weren't a British citizen. Never actually purchases the property. But he's buried in Westminster Abbey. He's Zadok the priest is still played at every coronation. It's still such a huge part of British culture, and he becomes such an important figure within that.
So thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge of George and Jimmy today.
No problem. Glad to do it.
To all our listeners, thanks very much for joining us today. I hope you've learnt a few more things. If you're wanting photos or indeed the transcript, you're available to get all of that on our show notes at londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast and then click on episode 63. Until next time.